Welcome back, everybody, to the Free Speech Forward podcast. I'm one of your co hosts, Joia. I'm here joined with my co founder of 1776 Forward, Chris Bush. And we are on this podcast exploring the behind the scenes perspectives, the how and why of free speech advocates and why they come to their beliefs about free speech and showcasing the diversity within this movement. And we're here today with Jennifer Richmond. I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to introduce her and let us know what we have to expect.
Yeah. Hi, Jennifer. Great to see you.
Nice to be here, y'all.
Jennifer, for all of you listening, she is one of the founders and board members of the Institute for Liberal Values, which is actually our co-sponsor for Free Speech Forward. So we're really excited to be able to speak with her and really showcase the people behind bringing you this new podcast series. A little bit about Jennifer. She's an international relations specialist, supports liberalism and universal values, and believes that we are at our best when protecting individual rights and freedoms. She worked in international relations for over 20 years, focusing on global geopolitics, intelligence, and East Asian policy, before turning her attention and cross-cultural skills towards the most polarizing issues within the U.S. and beyond. She is dedicated to learning how to communicate on difficult and polarizing issues in good faith to develop citizens and herself in building a strong and diverse community for democracy to thrive in. She's a co-author. W.F. Twyman Jr. Her and her co-author W.F. Twyman Jr. have recently released their book, Letters in Black and White: A New Correspondence on Race in America. So with that illustrious intro, let's just dive right in, Jennifer.
That was a lot. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, you have a great background, and I think it probably informs a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So I'll just turn it over to you and tell us kind of how all of this comes together for your advocacy of free speech. Have you always been an advocate of free speech?
Actually, I have to tell you, that's the first time I've actually been asked that, like straight up. I mean, I feel the answer is yes. When I go back and I think about that, I mean, my background is, which you mentioned, is international relations. And so when I was quite young, I was born, my father was an Air Force veteran. He was an Air Force test pilot. And I grew up at right outside of Ohio in outside Wright Pat Air Force Base. And shortly after that, so 10 years of my life was in Ohio. I mean, like, it was just normal. There wasn't much to say. And then we moved to Burma, which is now called Myanmar, but at the time it was called Burma. And I mean, I remember crying. My dad came home and he was like, "We are moving to Burma." My friends thought I was moving to Alabama, right? Like Birmingham, Burma. Like they didn't like there wasn't that connection. Like
That's what I thought you were saying first too. Yeah.
Yes, we're in the world. I feel like, where in the world is Burma? Well, so I ended up crying, and my father was like, "Well," I remember he said, "Well, there's tigers there," and I was like, "Okay, hold up, maybe this will be okay, right?" So, anyways, I went to again. I want to say it was fourth, fifth grade ish, sixth grade ish that I went there, and so still very like impressionable, etc. But the stuff I saw, Chris, there, and the disparity and the distinctions between what I had, and this again, being a young kid, not realizing what you had, to America was shocking. And I want to say, I want to say, and I do say, that was the watershed moment in my life. That is what made me who I am. And so from there, I went there and I saw how people lived literally under an authoritarian regime, right? Under a junta. I mean, it's changed since then, but it's still kind of a junta. But anyways, at the time, it was truly like it was funny. Here's a funny aside. We'd go on these trips. So they'd always plan these trips for the attachés, right? From all over the world. So attachés from China and the United States and the UK and wherever, India.
Yeah.
And we'd go on these trips and we'd be followed by guards. And I thought, I'm a VIP. Again, remember 4th, 5th, 6th grade, right? I'm like, I'm
Right.
special. I am a
Yeah.
VIP, you know?
Yeah.
No, it was so that we didn't see certain things.
Ah.
That's the
Mm,
reason the guards were there. They weren't there for me, although again, at 5th grade, I thought they were. I thought I was so special.
mm,
They were there so that I
yeah.
didn't turn the corner the wrong way, you know? So anyway, so
Mm,
fast forward, I we came back to the United States. I thought at the time I might want to go into the Air Force. That's what my father did. I'm a
mhm,
big one-upmanship, and so my father was a test pilot. I thought, well, I'd be an astronaut, like I'll show you.
mm. I love
Yeah, I
that.
know. Great personality I have here. But um, I went there and I was like, it just I realized I was so impacted by what happened in Burma. I was so influenced by difference. I loved it.
Mm,
I loved it so much. I loved going to school. I mean, again, this is another story, and it's random. But one of the big parties that we had with attachés, there was the Filipino attachés,
mm.
and one of their delicacies is an egg that that they don't open until it's almost fertilized. So literally, when you open it, unlike us cracking a hard boiled egg, it literally
Right.
has like the baby is inside, right? And I mean, to me, that was like, oh, whoa! But it was also fascinating. I was like, how did that come to be?
Right.
You know?
Right.
So I mean,
So
I saw these these things that while they kind of gross me out as an
yeah.
American, like whatever, I
Mhm.
was like, Tell me more. Like, how did that
Yeah.
become?" And so I became so fascinated. So when I decided to go to college, again, I thought I'd be an astronaut, show my dad up, whatever.
Mhm.
But I was
Yeah.
too fascinated with what I saw overseas. And I became an international relations specialist because I loved our differences so much, because I
Mm,
wanted to know
mm.
more all the time. So that's where, so I spent a long time to get to your question. Where am I at here? Why am I here? I think I answered
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I mean, certainly you see the contrast in the US for, all of its pros and cons on liberalism is most people would agree probably, the foremost leader on free speech, right? So you as an American, I think you probably can see the contrast in pretty much every other country on the spectrum of defense for free speech or lack thereof, right? So
Right.
I can see where that would totally inform your perspective and give you a really unique one. Well, I'm curious if, whether it was that formative experience early on or something, later in life that helped you connect the dots. Like
Mm,
today, where you sit,
mm.
what do you see as the value of free speech, both for you personally and for society in general?
Okay, so I do have another story for that. Okay,
Okay. Well, we love stories. That's the whole point of this podcast. So tell away.
so I'll carry on where I was at. So I went to college. I
Yeah.
decided to study international
Perfect.
relations. I went to a small liberal arts college, Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas.
Hmm.
And at the time, so I came out of, remember, I was living in Burma, now called Myanmar.
Hmm.
I learned how to speak Burmese, Thai, etc. And so I
Right.
had decided at this point I wanted to study international relations. I went to this small liberal arts college, and the only options
Hmm.
for language were Chinese and Japanese. So I was like, "Ugh, Chinese and Japanese. Like I lived in Southeast Asia. This is what I wanted to learn. And
Yeah.
I really literally chose Chinese only because when we were traveling to Burma, we'd stopped in Japan, we'd stopped in China, we'd stopped all over Asia. And my
Hmm.
experience in Japan just wasn't as pleasant as China. I mean, it literally came down to like I just had a more warm feeling of my experience in China. So I learned Chinese. This is
Interesting.
in the 90s before China became the juggernaut that it was going to be. This is before, we were even talking about China every day as we are now. And
Right.
so I learned the language. I went over, I read everything. I read about Mao. I read about the Cultural Revolution. I mean, that's what I read for fun. We're all reading Stephen King or whatnot. I read stories about the Cultural Revolution for fun. And I
Mm.
went over there and I lived there. And it was you this is what makes me sad. I know I'm jumping around, but I see what's happening right now on the universities, and I love it, honestly. I love the fact that we are able to stand up, protest, walk out, do all these things. But what makes me sad is I feel like these so many of our kids, my own kids included, my own kid,
Mhm.
not plural. Um, I want them to go there and see that because I mean, I got hung up in China in a hotel room with their Secret Service.
Wow. What'd you
It's
do to do that?
That's another story. Do we have time?
Well,
Um,
that might actually have informed why you see the value in freedom. Certainly freedom generally, I'm guessing, if not freedom of speech. I don't know if it was a speech issue, related issue.
well, it was you know what? Here it was. It was a protest issue.
Okay. Well, then, yeah, there you go.
It was a protest issue.
Yeah.
And I value that so much. And what disappoints me is when we
Yeah.
look at these protesters who I value so much,
Yep.
but their message, when it is their message, it's not always, so I don't want to generalize, but
Right.
when their message is
Sure.
take down America, take down this, I'm like, the whole reason you're standing here right now is because it's America.
Yeah.
This would not, I can tell you by my own personal experience, this would
Yeah.
not happen in China. When this happened in China, I found myself in a hotel room with a flight booked home the next day.
Wow.
Now, granted,
Wow.
I'm making it a little bit more. I mean, I was already leaving, so like
Yeah.
there's that. But
Yeah.
I literally
You're
feared
giving us the essence of the story. Yeah.
that I would be persona non grata. Now, there's reasons why I wasn't. That can be a story for another podcast. But to
Yeah.
me, what makes me so sad is like this is a blessing. This is a blessing, but for the conversation to be how do we dismantle America? I mean, I'm like, you're doing what you're doing because of where you're
Because
at.
of, yeah.
So,
Well, I love that story, and it hits particularly home for me because as a nice coincidence and aside, I also studied Chinese in college. I was, I guess, a decade behind you, or maybe a little more, in era, so they were already on the rise in the early 2000s, and so I kind of saw the value in learning that. I had to learn a language in college, so I chose Chinese because I was probably a glutton for difficulty. And I also went over there and definitely saw firsthand the limitations of what I could say and do, even back then, which was probably a more open and liberal time than it is now there. So I totally resonate with you. I think that's a great segue into my next question, which is maybe give us a little bit of insight into how you what's your method for preparing to stand up, speak out, or take on an activism project, and any kind of tips for how you find your voice.
hmm. I think this one might be a harder question for me because I find myself this is good and bad. I find our podcast is the dissidents, right? So dissidents like yourself, Chris, like Joya, like other people who are part of the Institute for Liberal Values, Free Black Thought, Eric Smith, Brandy Shufutinsky,
Mhm.
we're all dissidents, right? So
Yeah.
I've found my tribe, if you will.
Mhm.
But your question begs the answer. I mean, we found the tribe, but how do we actually like move out of the tribe? That's the whole point.
Right. Yeah,
And
exactly.
I have to tell you, actually, okay, I'll tell you another story. I found myself in a sorry, I know these are supposed to be like 30-minute conversations, but I'm
No,
cut me
it's
off when you
great.
want me to cut
I
off.
mean, this is the behind the scenes, and each person's going to have their own unique story, literally and figuratively. So
Well,
go on, I'm loving it.
so this is what I don't know. I really like so this weekend I was with my mother. We were at an art show. in Southern California. So very, she. And someone asked me, what do you do? And I'm like, "Oh, I don't have the elevator pitch yet, Chris, for what I do,
Mm.
right?" So I'm kind of throwing
Right.
stuff out there, like, I don't know, we kind of create curricula, we create education around like I don't want I hate anti, but I'm trying to find my
Yeah.
elevator pitch. Something that's different from BLM, something that's different from DEI, but still like has those principal core values of difference, of plurality, whatnot. And I think I
Mhm.
use the word anti, which I would change if I were to have this conversation again, because I don't
Try it
like the word.
again. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But whether I said anti or not, I hit the word BLM and everything kind of like pulled back, and all of a sudden here I
Uh,
am. What
yeah.
do I say now, And but
That's
here's
the
where
third rail.
it is. But okay,
Yeah.
so a couple things that I learned from this weekend that I think speaks to your question is
Yeah.
at first I felt defense, right? I felt defense from people
Mm.
I was speaking to.
Mhm.
And I get it, right? I
Mhm.
mean, like
Mm.
I think I use the wrong words. I think I put people on the defense.
Yeah.
Um, what I would do differently, how I would start the conversation the next time is to
Mhm.
ask these people, what is your story first? I want to know,
Mm.
like, where are you coming to this conversation? Now, here's the problem, though, Chris. I mean, this was an art auction, right? So, I mean, it's not like we're sitting there and
Right.
we're singing "Kumbaya" for like 4 days,
And
and
it's
we
not
haven't.
philosophy. Yep.
Right. Yeah,
Mhm.
we're not like hugging each other at the end of I mean, we're like literally like, passing by each other, ships in the night. And so
Right.
after this interaction where I mentioned BLM and the everything got tense and I got actually,
Yeah.
I would say, I don't want to make it too extreme, but I was shouted down. I mean, again, shouted down. I was
Mm.
spoken very
Mm.
loudly too down.
Yeah.
And I walked away
We've
and
all
I
been there.
Yes. Again, I don't it wasn't extreme, like, no one's crying, we're all doing okay. But I walked away
It's
and
a
I said,
heated
"Look,"
discussion. Yeah.
it was a thank you. That was it. It was a heated discussion with a gentleman, a very, very well-spoken gentleman that it was a very engaging conversation whose skin color was darker than mine.
Mhm.
So, but at the end of so I walked away because I had to. I had things to do. Like I wasn't trying to escape the conversation. I had to walk away.
Right.
But it was so important to me. And I said to him, "This isn't about you. It's not about me. I really want to know more about you and I want to hear what you have to say. I have to walk away now, but can we keep this conversation going on?" And as fate has
Mm.
it, later that evening, I'm walking around and he's happens to be on the lawn where we're staying. And walked up to him and I said, "Hey, tell me about you. Like, why are you even here right now? What brought you
Mm.
here? Who's your family? Like, what makes you tick? Why do you get up in the morning?" And that changed everything. At that point, I was
Wow.
talking to him as a person who, like, I knew, like, what made. I mean, they weren't the same things that made me tick, but at this point, I'm curious, right? Like, okay, that makes you tick. Like,
Mhm.
why? But here's the problem, Chris. And this is, again, I've been thinking about this for a while now. We don't
Mhm.
have that time. We don't have that
Mm.
time when we get in these heated moments. We don't have that time often to stand back and go, "Tell me about you." Before I have this conversation about something about MLK or Donald Trump or anything heated,
Mhm.
we need to
Right.
know who the other person is first. I need to see myself in your eyes. And we
Yeah.
just and so the answer is to do that, but it begs the question, when? And to
Right.
that, I don't have an answer. Everything is so fast paced. Everything is social media. Everything is so, we're just so trigger happy. And
Well, I
so
think yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice. I've definitely it tracks with some of the some of the better advice that I've heard on public speaking or the art of communication, and particularly when it comes to controversial topics, which I think free speech issues tend to cover, of finding a way to personalize and connect with your audience, and kind of uh, put yourself in their shoes in a way. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think to the extent that we can even do that, because it's so hard with all of us here and social media and everything we've just said, to the extent that we
yeah,
can do that, it comes across in these kind of communications, right? It comes across like just
yeah.
even like, I mean, I would love to have this guy on a podcast and actually just like talk to him, but
Talk it out.
it went
Yeah,
from 0 to 100 in this amount of time because everything was so heated. Whereas if I knew him as a human, as a man who like, cared about these things and that things, like we could have reconnected
yeah,
on so many levels. So how do we do that on a large scale? I think that's the question that we have to ask ourselves.
yeah. Agreed. Um, just transitioning again to my
Sorry,
next
I keep on
question.
taking us off. Sorry. Sorry.
What's that? No, no, this has been great. My wheels are spinning. I mean, I think that's a great advice, frankly, and it's one I'm definitely going to be taking to heart as well, and incorporating into my method, because I think it's great, and you really hit on. I mean, I think so much of the acrimony in our discourse these days is because we've been depersonalizing each other,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Mhm.
I do love that. Um, Kind of going to a more kind of creative hypothetical question, which we always like hearing from our guests. If resources, time, money were no issue, what project or specific cause do you think is most worth pursuing right now, for the cause of free speech?
Actually, okay. I'm gonna just touch on
You
the
can give
one.
more than one. Yeah,
Well, there's so much, and clearly I'm taking up a
I
lot of
think I
time here.
had two in mind.
I Here's what I think this is where my passion is. And this is where my passion is with the Institute for Liberal Values. Is I
Hmm.
feel that what we're teaching teachers has to change. And I think that that really is the core of so much. So we have really teacher training institutes, and I can give you several links of where I've had conversations with people who actually are part of teacher training institutes, including several
Hmm.
people who are part of ILV. They have really glammed on to Paulo Freire's The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And that
Mm.
teaches a narrative that I that is devoid in many ways. In many ways. I mean, you again, we can everyone has a different point of view, but of
Mm.
critical thinking, of I don't know. Chris, again, I go back to why I do what I do is because I
Hmm.
grew up in a country where you couldn't have these conversations.
Mm.
And the
Hmm.
fact that we are sitting here having this conversation, the fact that we have students right now on university campuses saying what they want to say, to the extent that it
Hmm.
doesn't intimidate or hurt other people. And
Yep, that's a separate
again,
issue.
yeah, that's a
Hmm.
separate issue. I mean,
Yep.
that amazes me. You would never see this in China. You would never see this in Burma. You would never
No.
see this in Russia. You probably wouldn't see this in places even as liberal as, like, say, India, where I spent a
Yeah.
lot of time. And
Hmm.
so my I think my to go I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent, but to get back to what would I do differently? I think that a lot of the times what I'm seeing right now are teachers supporting our kids going out to protest, which I don't have a problem with. Again, like,
Right.
this is what America's about. If you wanna support this,
Yeah.
do it. But they're
Right.
supporting it without that critical thinking, like, without that context that I just gave. By the way, the
Yeah.
reason that you're able to do this is because we live in a country that lets you do this. And to show
Yeah.
them, like, if you were to live in Cuba, if you were to live in China, if you were to live in again, even, like, democratic countries like India, this
Hmm.
isn't your option. And then to take that and say, okay, so you've got this option now as a teacher. If I were a teacher, let's talk about this. Like, why would you be going out there now? What is your purpose? What do you care
Hmm.
about? And actually having that conversation. And I feel like everything's right now is so emotional. And I get it. Chris, if we were in college right now and someone said you get to walk off campus and not take your tests, and there might be beer on the other side of the tents.
Well, and that's a whole separate issue, right? In terms of the sincerity of half of them. Yep.
I mean, I'd like to think that I was
But to
more.
your point, I mean, the fact that that is even an option really sets America apart, right?
It does,
And
but
that
I
is,
didn't know that then. And I don't think they know that now. Again, if someone
well,
I'm
and that's what you're saying, right? Is
yes,
contextualizing it for the students
right.
and really a more liberal grounded uh, teaching, kind of teaching pedagogy and philosophy, right? Sounds like what you're getting at.
It does, and I'll tell one more story. So
Yeah.
during the BLM protests and whatnot back in 2020, 2021, when we were all sequestered to our homes, I was at a friend's house, and my friend's daughter was taking a course online because that's what we did then. It's what we do now even. And
Yeah.
I remember, and it floored me. The professor said, if you go to the BLM protests, I will give you extra credit. I mean, I
Wow. I
sat
mean,
there
I
and
did hear those stories, so I guess I shouldn't be so surprised, but I forgot I blocked them out of my memory, honestly.
no, it was I mean, I literally, like, I was kind of like, I'm hiding in the background because, you're not supposed to be seen on the camera, and I was like, "What?" You know? And I asked my girlfriend, I was like, "Did you just hear that?" Like, and so that that worries me, that scares me. I mean, what if you didn't agree? If you didn't agree, you would be graded down.
Yeah.
Because you didn't
Yeah.
and let's even, like, go further. Again, my biggest point is, like, the free speech issue, right?
Right.
But here we are
Right.
supposed to be wearing masks and sequestering, but someone is saying, "Go out to this, like, very, crowded public
Dense,
space,"
crowded public
right,
gathering.
which you're
Yep.
not supposed to do apparently, but unless it's for this, and you'll get an A, or you'll at least get extra credit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the politicization of activism, and education kind of combined, right? That's
Yeah.
what that represented.
Yeah, and
Uh,
there was an opportunity there, Chris. There was an opportunity there that was such a beautiful opportunity to have that conversation. Why are we doing this now? What's happening? What does America
yeah.
stand for? Why are we not standing for what we stand? There was so much beautiful educational opportunity there, and we just grounded it all to a simple, yes, no, pro, against, pro, anti, and there you are.
Well, for whatever it's worth, I think there's an emerging theme across all of our guests so far of some form or another of investing in education about free speech. So I think you hit the mark, but you're the first one to note about the teachers. And
Mm.
considering they're the ones teaching the courses, then arguably they're one of the most important places to focus on. So I love that idea as well. We love this question to get good ideas like that.
Well, and I will say, I will just put a finer point on it to answer your question of, like, what I'm doing and what's important to me. That's it. That's it. So, to the extent that ILV has any cachet, to the extent that my networks have any cachet, to the extent that I have any influence at all, and I don't know that I do, but it is towards creating new programs for teachers to teach a full. We're always asking, teach the full history, but it's kind of a scam. Teach the full history, but only.
It's said disingenuously. Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to let's just take BLM as a example. I want to teach the full man, it embarrasses me how we supported slavery. I mean, it is not it's not fun. No one is going out and going, "Go America, slavery," right?
Right.
But the people that I have met, the Eric Smiths, the Brandy Shufatinskys, the people who are part of this organization, the Tabia Lees, who have
Mhm.
they don't want to be, what's the word I want to say? I mean, their legacy is one of like overcoming, which I look at and go, holy mackerel. Like, we have this horrible history, and yours is one of overcoming. And that's the story we're not telling. Don't I'm not
Right.
saying don't tell the story of the crap that went on. I mean, utter crap.
Yeah.
I'm using good language here, but I could
Right.
use worse language. It's
Yeah.
it's the fact that, like, there's that story and then there's another story, but
And only that story. Yeah.
we're only teaching that story. That I think if our kids, black, white, or other, don't know that not only was there that story, the crappy story, but there is this story of people who actually overcame, which is why we're having this
Right.
conversation now.
Right.
That if you don't tell that story, then you just stop there in your tracks and you're like, well, why even try?
Right.
And
Well,
I
and that at least in America, among other liberal societies, that we had the means to overcome it. It was through using American ideals and institutions that we were able to triumph over that. And I think, to tie it back to some of your earlier points, at least as I think about that issue, um, again, context matters, right?
mm,
Slavery was not unique to America, although it might have, lasted longer than other liberal
right.
societies here. But to your point, it wasn't unique, and B, it was overcome. And certainly, at least in our organization at 1776 Forward, part of why we even chose that name and wanting to reclaim the American ideal, liberal ideals,
Mm.
ultimately at root, is because we see the promise and the benefit that comes from following them consistently and practicing them, fully, which is how I think every minority or oppressed group in our society has ultimately been able to overcome that oppression.
And so I think for me, this comes full circle. Why I do this, why it matters to me, is because I spent my life overseas. I did not spend my life in America.
Mm,
And when I'd come back and I'd see the promise and the benefits to people who looked very different from me. And a lot of what I did also in my work in international relations was helping people find their job or their future or their whatever in America. They couldn't find it anywhere else. I'm not saying that's not without hardship. I'm not saying that's not without prejudice. It was.
hmm
But for me to hear some of the voices coming out now and saying like how we are terrorists and we are, I mean, we need to be dismantled and we are colonial, imperialists and all this thing. None of it, I mean, again, I will have that conversation with anyone. I mean, these aren't they're not lies. I mean, these are things that we have been in our life, but we've also been so much more. We are a
Right.
place that people come to because they can have this conversation. And it breaks
hmm
my heart for people who have never seen what it really looks like, what it really looks like to live in China or Russia or, Burma, and to be lamenting that they can't get their, tent or whatnot. And I'm just like,
And they're sweet greens, so they don't starve.
again, I have sympathy. Free speech I'm about, right? I mean, do
Yeah,
it.
oh, yeah.
But
Well, free
the
speech is one
context,
thing. Making demands and intimidation, I think, is a
right.
separate issue, right? So,
And the
but
context, I just don't
but
think
I
there's the context there.
yeah, I
And
agree.
that's why I do what I do.
Well, that almost, I mean, it's a little longer than an elevator pitch, but I think there's several good ideas in those last couple questions that you can pull into it. So that definitely pretty much, or we're a little over our time, but I guess any last tips of advice for people looking to find their voice to stand up and speak out for causes that are important to them, or just standing up for free speech in a time which, admittedly, as we said, why we're both here, is becoming harder and harder to do.
My only tip would be, this is hard because I think, like I was saying earlier, like you have to get to know the other, if you will, to have the conversations that matter. But getting to know the other is difficult when you're like yelling at each
Mm-hmm.
other and you've got, across tents and whatnot. That's difficult. But where it's possible is just in the one person, right? So like telling your story. And again, I think that this is the message that came back to me when I had this kind of debate the other night was I
Mm-hmm.
started out with the debate. I didn't start out with who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we only have so much time in the day. And so you can only, do this so often. But before you even get into to the debate, if you can just even ask a question like, where were you born? I mean, again, something like, what color do you like? I don't know. Something that
Yeah.
doesn't have to do, something that makes you human.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's your
Love that.
favorite animal? Again,
Mm-hmm.
I'm being trite. I know I'm being
Yeah.
trite, but I don't mean to be. Like, before you even get into, like, would you vote for Donald Trump? Like, find out who that person is, even if it's on, like, a scale of 1, like, you like cats, I like cats. I don't like cats, by the way, but the dogs. You like dogs, I like dogs. I mean, at least we're
Yeah.
there. At
No,
least
I mean, to your point, that definitely breaks the ice, so to speak, and humanizes people.
but we're not doing that. And so again, I know it's hard to actually really get to know someone intimately in a way that you can have these like really deep conversations, but to ask before you ask who you're voting for, maybe ask, do you have a dog? I don't know, but actually
Yeah.
to connect at a very human level before you go there. And again, I know this sounds trite. It is trite. There's so much more that we're trying to do in terms of education around free speech, but this is where we're at. This is where we're at. This is, we're
Yeah.
sitting there on college campuses where we've got literal barriers across us. If we could just like meet the other person at some level where they're at. Do you like dogs? No, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
better than where we're
No.
at now.
Yeah. Agree. Well, and think certain phrases or ideas are trite and cliche for a reason, because there's often a lot of truth to them, and sometimes the most overlooked or simple truths uh, continue to be some of the most important and relevant ones.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This was a great conversation, and thank you to all of you out there listening. If you'd like to learn more, you can find us at either of our organizations, 1776forward.com and ilvalues.org. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Chris.